Hello, it's Julie Beeling with Beneath Sheep's Clothing, and I'm here with Seth Stewart, someone I met just recently, and we'll be joined a little bit later, probably just in a few minutes, with Jacob Oakes, and two really interesting guys with a lot of knowledge and a lot to say about communism, about freedom, and about where we're at right now as a nation. Some historical things that are really important to understand. And I really, after talking with both of them a couple weeks ago around the 4th of July, I was like, wow, I think I need to get this out there to more people. So thanks so much for joining me here, Seth.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And I noticed you're wearing Beneath Sheep's Clothing t-shirt there. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we just had our city's parade is going on this morning, and I decided this is a good thing to wear this morning, make people aware of it.
Awesome.
Because yeah, if I could have the wish of my heart, everybody would understand what's going on with communism and where the ideologies that they embrace, even sometimes when they think they're fighting against communism, where do those come from?
Yeah, yeah. So let me just tell everyone. So I met you a couple weeks ago. I was at a booth up in Provo, Utah, with Jacob Oakes, actually. He's with Liberty United here in Utah. It's a really fantastic liberty-oriented organization. And I was promoting Beneath Sheep's Clothing at the booth. And you've known Jacob, I guess, for a while. And you came up and I started telling you about the film, and then you started telling me about some of the stuff that you're into and what you've been doing and what your father, his personal experience that I think is extremely relevant. And so it's like, wow, we've got to talk further. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do? And then I want to start talking to you about your father. And, a lot of people have asked me over the last few years, oh, what do you think about Russia? What do you think about the Russia-Ukraine conflict? And I've had two opposing viewpoints on a shelf, and talking with you pretty much clinched it for me that what my viewpoint is on at least the government of Russia currently, that it's really, really super sketchy, not to be trusted, probably closet communists. But anyways, please tell us about yourself and what you're up to, what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm just a software engineer. I do what people call AI and machine learning. In reality, there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's just linear algebra and computer software. But that's what I do for a living. And I got very, very keenly interested. I've always been interested in preserving freedom. And one of the more impactful things I've been able to do in that regard is to get involved in the Utah Republican caucus system. There was a letter from the first presidency that went out. It was read over the pulpit in sacrament meeting saying, go get involved in your precinct caucus meetings. And I was like, oh, I've never done that before. It was my first time actually being a registered voter in Utah back in 2016 when the signature gathering path was first installed. And so I started showing up to these meetings and volunteering for assignments within the Utah Republican Party and so on. And that has shown me a lot of things about how our election system has been massively corrupted, including notably the what my friend Michael Clara refers to as signature gate, with Spencer Cox edging out the Republican nominee off of the general election ballot this last year. That's
Really quick for
you
anyone
could
who
argue
doesn't,
that's a separate story.
just let me insert really quick. Spencer Cox is the illegitimate governor of Utah. Please continue.
Yes, correct. Yes, he's illegitimate because he was not. It was only a small minority of people, 3% roughly of the registered voter population, uh, got him on this signature nominating petition, which replaced the delegates' choice from the nominating convention for the party. Um, Parties shouldn't have control over elections in the first place. That's one of the first things that's horribly broken about this. But also, multiple audits have revealed that he did not actually receive enough signatures. So even according to law as written, he should never have even been on a primary ballot. Um, Anyways, I can go into the deep dive on the corruption of elections in the history of Utah and the nation, and that's actually integrally connected to this whole history of how our freedoms have been systematically dismantled and taken away in our entire country. And yeah, Utah and the church, frankly, I'll just put that out there, have been in the crosshairs. Frankly, the adversary wants religious freedom gone, because religious freedom is what keeps people from embracing communism. Communism is Satan's counterfeit religion. So just setting the backdrop there and taking us all the way back to the war in heaven, but trying to be as concise as I can, putting breadcrumbs there if anybody wants to follow up on any of these topics. But that's a brief, very brief bio on me, I guess.
Okay.
Married, got 6
You're
kids.
running for city council in your city right now?
Yes, I live in American Fork, Utah, and we've been here for 6.5 years. I lived in Provo before that. I was a BYU student, and then we moved here. And I'm running for city council because I've been very, very concerned about what the city is spending on. There's been a lot of, high density housing that just cropped up over by the lake there, and lots of issues where our city government's been spending money on things that it shouldn't be. And part of this is coordinated with Utah's illegitimate governor, Spencer Cox, with his Build Council, which, for those who are paying attention, it revives the Beehive Development Agency, which was part of a failed bill this last legislative session that would basically consolidate the state, county, and municipal governments all in one. And that's very concerning because we're supposed to have popular sovereignty. But right now, the city's model is that supposedly they're granted authority from the state legislature. But that completely inverts the principle of popular sovereignty. The states, for example, of the United States, they don't derive authority from the federal government. The federal government doesn't give them permission to do things. It's we the people. We the people expressly delegate authority and power to do things to our state governments by way of our state constitutions. And it's the exact same thing with our municipal governments. So my first question for the mayor and city council here was, where's our charter? And the answer is we don't have one. There are some articles of incorporation which are not the same thing. As far as I can tell, they were never actually ratified by the people. But basically, the government does whatever it wants and whatever the state legislature says they can get away with, and the people let them get away with, they just do, including all these massive spending projects that are really not pursuant to any enumerated powers. And that's one of the ways that corruption gets installed. So that's in a nutshell why I'm running for city council.
So you're running for city council to try to see what you can do to rectify any of that. Thank you.
Yeah, just have us move to a charter form of government, bare minimum. Just actually do things by consent of the people.
Okay. But Seth, what I wanted to talk with you about when I met you at the booth at that event was you mentioning your father's work for the Department of Defense as a translator and translating, getting the intel on what was going on with Russia during the 1980s, even before the president, because he was translating it and giving further evidence to the theory that I had heard from Joel Skousen, Trevor Loudon, two very, very well-researched individuals, that communism did not collapse in the Soviet Union, that it was a sham, that communism went underground. And I heard that idea and I was like, wow, that's pretty shocking to hear. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's not true. It's on a shelf. But talking with you and hearing about your father's experience really has pushed me over the edge. So please give us that history of just lay it out for us and we can ask questions as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So credit to my father for this. He worked for the Department of Defense. He was a translator, started in the 80s there. And one of the things he was very keenly interested in is preserving our nation's integrity. So this was during the World War. He wanted America to survive. And
Cold War, you mean?
What was that?
The Cold War, you mean?
Sorry, what did I say?
You said World War.
Did I say the World War? Okay. My language unit's been kind of shot ever since COVID. But anyways, caught a bad case of it in 2022. And anyways, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. So during the Cold War, and so he was very interested in this. He was an analyst who was heavily involved in the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was the nuclear umbrella over the United States, and so he was working on that. And so as a translator, one of the really interesting things is he found that he would actually learn about things, important developments in foreign nations, even before the President of the United States would know about them. Because in order to handle any communication, any information, even from public foreign news media, it would have to go through a translator, the translation process. And so he was privy to a lot of things that people in the general public were not in the know, and even people within government would not have known without the translator as the intermediate there. So one of the things, though, the key experience here, there were instances where he observed that our strategic defense initiative was intentionally gutted from the inside by Congress. It would have worked, and it would have cost a fraction of what Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, has already cost us. And so it was absolute treason to have slashed that program. But one of the experiences, one of the very harrowing experiences I believe everyone should know about, is he was working in a field office. This was around the 1991-92 timeframe. It was shortly before Bill Clinton took the office of the presidency, and he received a directive from his commanding officer saying, "Stop monitoring Russian troop movements, or else we will pull your funding." Now, if that isn't treason, I don't know what is. You be the judge. But the fallout from that was...
This directive was from Congress or from the president? Or who was this directive from for him to stop monitoring?
I don't have full clarity on where this directive originated from, but it was delivered through the commanding officer, through their command and control structure. I presume the other field offices that had anything to do with Russian military intelligence would have received the same directive. But that was the instruction. Stop looking at the Russians, or else we will pull your funding. And so whoever...
Pull the funding for Department of Defense, for the field offices?
For those field offices, for any roles, any positions, any projects that were funded that involved military espionage and surveillance of the Soviet troop activities. And my father was very involved in that. And so that meant that the work he was doing was being slashed. And what's interesting about that, the side that the Westerners are aware of, is that the defense intelligence reports dried up, which cascaded. That's what triggered the Western news media proudly proclaiming, announcing to the world that the Soviet Union had fallen. It's collapsed. Look, see, we don't have any more reports on their military buildup. Look, they must be in a shambles. And the part of that that's true, that the public had their attention diverted to by the media, is the fact that you look at the economy of the Soviet states, right? In Russia, they were dirt poor. And so you could easily go in there with the camera team and not even have to set up a Potemkin village to convey the deprivations of the people. You would just candidly observe what's going on there, and you would be compelled to conclude, oh wow, these people are not well off. Yeah, they're in a horrible situation. And that's true with respect to their domestic economy, which was practically non-existent, because the Soviet doctrine is to use the entire national product to make bullets instead of bread. It's about conquest, not domestic economy. There's a saying, actually, because of the Soviet military doctrine, because of how they behaved, it's really, really worthwhile to understand Soviet military doctrine. It contradicts almost everything we do in the Western world. But every satellite the Soviets put up, there's no such a satellite that doesn't have a military purpose, right? And the same could be said for practically every one of their national expenditures. It all has a military purpose. And what's really interesting about this, what I would call people's attention to, is really easy to, this is public information, anyone can verify this, is that even the mainstream, Democrat-controlled news media have done some reports and documentaries on this. Like you can actually go and I'm forgetting the news channel. If I can find the reference here, I can share it. But You can watch this interview and this documentary of these people going and touring these Soviet era missile silos and talking with the military brass there, and they openly admit that their military, their command and control structures, and their nuclear readiness have remained intact continuously, notwithstanding the alleged fall of the Soviet Union. And so they never actually demilitarized. There has never been a microsecond in which every major American city has not had a handful of nuclear warheads mounted on ICBMs pointed at it, intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach us from Russia. There has never been a moment, since the Cold War supposedly ended, and since they gained that capability, when they have not been prepared just the Supreme Leader has to give his word, send the order, and they will push those buttons and send those nukes to the United States.
Okay, I'm going
to
pause you for just a second because I want to break down a couple of things, because this is a lot, and some people may not have heard this before. So let's backtrack to that whole idea that the coup that happened in whatever it was, 1999, end of 1990, beginning of 1991, in which the Soviet Union ceased to exist, and they broke up the 13 republics and back into their own nations. And because that did happen, let's backtrack to how that was communism going underground, and why Trevor Loudon has said that. Why is Joel Skousen? It was from a KGB agent, Anatoly Golitsyn, who defected and shared that this was going to be what they had planned. They were planning this in advance to scam America and scam the world, and then I guess stealthily taken out. I was gonna try to read that book this week, and I have to admit I got a hold of it, and I was like, it was so dense. I'm just like, I don't think I have the space to take this book in right now.
I mean, even just the foreword is very, very revealing.
Okay.
It's concise, and he sets out his disappointment, his shock. I mean, can you imagine? So here's this defector from the Soviet KGB, and he says, "Hey guys, look, they're going to play dead. Hey, look, they have these. They used what's called the Leninist dialectic." He references that multiple times, and that the Leninist dialectic is where you control the opposition. It's the exact same thing that Jacob Oakes was just talking about with the two-party system in America, to where there's really not that much difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, honestly, because National Socialism and global communism are in fact birds of a feather. I've got loads of proof for that, including with the Utah elections that I've been participating in. We could do a separate deep dive on that one to just prove the case and how that's affected the National Electoral College, the formation of the parties. I can absolutely corroborate that from Utah's own founding, that the National Republican Party in the United States was in fact, you don't even have to rely on any kind of allegations of secret meetings or associations. It's by their fruits ye shall know them. Yeah. And the things that the Republican Party was designed to do from the very beginning are in fact objectives of the communists. And so you can see all that. It's tightly contemporaneous. One resource I would cite listeners to is Vladimir Lenin actually wrote a pamphlet describing the Leninist dialectic. It's called One Step Forward, Two Steps Backwards. And that's where he describes this controlled opposition thing. It works like a hangman's noose. It cinches up one way, right? Yeah. And that describes the liberal conservative divide. Liberals come in, they smash things, they break things, they're very hot-headed, they change things quickly. And then the conservatives are the normalizers. They come in and maybe throw away half of that, but then keep the other half. Exactly what happened with Obamacare. Anyways, back to Russia, because that's
really quick. The name of the book that is by Anatoly Golitsyn, it's called New Lies for Old: The Communist Strategy of Deception and Disinformation, published in 1984 in America, and it's in the Internet Archives. You can read it online for free. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and he wrote another one called The Perestroika Deception.
Yes.
And in this one, he predicted that the Soviet Union would play dead, and was actually describing how they were doing it. And his prediction, his track record was like 95-96% accurate. And people would try to debunk him, and like they just couldn't. because his predictions kept coming true. And this is one of those predictions. But one of the things you look at in his book is he was absolutely astonished. He was appalled at the fact that when he came and raised these alarm bells and said, hey, they're going to try to play dead. Perestroika, by the way, means reform or restructuring. It's 100% this, by the way, actually. It's the sheep's clothing. That's what perestroika means, right? So if you, for those who are readers of the Book of Mormon, this was foretold in there, by the way, in that there would be many in the last days who would believe a certain kind of deception, and that kind of deception is that which says, I am no devil, for there is none. Right? The devil pretended to cease to exist. All is well in Zion. Right? That is perestroika to a T. And Anatoly Golitsyn, he goes into this. He says one of the strategies of the perestroika movement is to get you to believe that the danger is over, that it's ended, that your enemies are now friends.
Let me add a little bit for people not familiar with perestroika. Perestroika, Mikhail Gorbechev in the Soviet Union brought that in. Glasnost, which means openness, which means they could start talking about their history more openly. In perestroika, they were rebuilding the Soviet system so that it was more free. There was less oppression. And it was this period of reforms that was in the years leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So anyways, please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And Margaret Thatcher, who's touted and acclaimed by many conservatives as the kind of ultra-conservative prime minister of the UK at the time, she had an interview with Mikhail Gorbechev, and she came out of that just saying, wow, everything he says sounds like the standard robotic Soviet apparatchik type of a narrative. Everything here sounds like Sovietism, and it is, but the tone is so different. It's so professional, so humble, so meek, so charming. And she came out of this saying, people were asking her, saying, well, do you think he's changed? Do you think the Soviets have just stopped being bad? And she's like, yeah, I hope so. I don't know, right? And I'm just like, really? And this is exactly the kind of thing that Golitsyn was calling out in his book on the Perestroika Deception. He's saying, how could you fall for this? Because you know that they haven't changed. Are you really going to mistake style for substance? And this is a huge thing to look out for. We've had discussions before about the LGBTQ, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, how you get shamed. There's a shame culture. It's supposedly moral, right? And they're trying to shame you into compliance, into abandoning conscience, essentially, under the pretense that, hey, we're the good guys, right? And the worst thing you can do is be impolite. That is Utah illegitimate Governor Spencer Cox's Disagree Better movement to a T. It really means don't disagree at all. It's a chilling factor to stop people from exercising their First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and so on, because you don't dare disagree with these guys, right? But what astonished Golitsyn is he came here to the United States and he's telling us all these things that are easily verified. He's got a golden track record. And he said, the liberals, I could understand them sympathizing with these global communists because they are more ideologically aligned. But what he couldn't understand is that conservatives would unquestioningly swallow, embrace, and accept the perestroika narrative. They wanted peace at any price. And what maybe Golitsyn didn't fully realize is that the two-party system in America is identical to the Leninist dialectic that he was describing. It is controlled opposition. Like Jacob was saying, well, at least we're not transing our kids. At least we don't tell kids that they can be cats and stuff. And that's how moral relativism gets installed. It's because you're no longer concerned about what is right. You're more concerned about who can be made to appear more wrong. And that is the party system that our founding fathers, notably George Washington, warned us in the strongest terms against. That would be the destruction of America. And lo and behold. So let's get back to perestroika again. I'm jumping around, touching a lot of subjects because these are all interconnected. Have faith that as you study these topics, anybody who's listening, these things are interconnected. They're interconnected for a reason. All the way back to the original fight for freedom before we came to this earth. They're all interconnected, and it's the same fight. But with perestroika, what's really devastating, what's really dangerous about it, is that we just keeled over and we just believed them. There's a quote, and to the point of saying we should listen from the horse's mouth if they have told us what their plan is. Like evil Professor Moriarty is monologuing and he's telling you his evil plot to take over the world. You better actually listen, because there could be nuggets in there that will actually, like, even the devil has his moments of candor, right? And here's one of those. This is 1930. This is from Dmitri Manuilsky, who's a professor at the Lenin School of Political Warfare in Moscow. So this is Mikhail Gorbachev's class where he did his senior thesis, where he was trained on political warfare and the ideals of communism, right? And so this is what this professor Dmitri Manuilsky said. He said, "War to the hilt between communism and capitalism is inevitable. Today, of course, we are not strong enough to attack. Our time will come in 30 or 40 years. To win, we shall need the element of surprise. The Western world will have to be put to sleep. So we shall begin by launching the most spectacular movement on record. There shall be electrifying overtures and unheard of concessions. These stupid and decadent will rejoice to cooperate to their own destruction. They will leap at another chance to be friends. As soon as their guard is down, we shall smash them clenched fist." So that's the official Soviet doctrine.
Okay.
Is to sing these overtures of peace, lull the Western world to sleep, and then destroy us when our guard is down.
Okay, and I have to mention that that's an astonishing quote. I have to mention one more thing that Golitsyn exposed in his books. I haven't read the books yet, and that China, that there was going to be a faux split, like conflict between the Soviets and the communist Chinese, and that China would go to America and be like, "Oh, we've repented from our communism, give us your money," and basically rebuild their society, because the communist economic system does not work. It does not produce. And so they needed capital to build their communist machine. They needed to pretend to be cooperative with America to get this capital from America to become an economic superpower in China, also for the point of purpose of conquest. That Golitsyn also said that was going to happen. And he said this well before it actually happened. Anyways, I had to mention that as well, but please continue.
Yeah, and now we have the foundation for understanding why the Second World War occurred, why that was started, right?
Okay, tell me.
Because you look at the aftermath. Look at who came in and scooped up the benefits from that. You look at who consolidated power, who got the welfare, who got the aid packages, right? And in China, our own government, our own United States president was actually sabotaging the incumbent regime and propping up the communists to take over. And riddle me this. So I used to play this board game when I was a kid, Axis and Allies. Okay, yeah, and just what's really interesting about this, you don't have to play a board game to learn this, but like, just ask yourself the question, what were the National Socialists doing fighting against the global communists during the Second World War, and why were the global communists on the side of the Allies?
Yeah, I have definitely had questions as to why we and the UK, allied with the Soviet Union and Stalin in particular. I have questioned that. Yes.
And you can see that it was a prelude. It was arguably even part of that overture of peace towards the West, right? If you have this ideology that the enemy of your enemy is your friend, then all someone has to do is just not like somebody that you don't like, and then suddenly you're buddies. I think trust requires a lot more to be earned. It takes a lot more to earn trust than that. It should anyway.
One thing that I found interesting, so when I was in grad school and reading the dissident literature of dissident Soviet literature and literature of the Gulag in particular, it came up a few times in this literature of the inmates in the Gulag eating spam. And spam that was gifted, and food that was gifted to them by the United States of America. that was what they were eating in the gulag. Well, if they had stuff to eat, sometimes they didn't have hardly anything to eat. But um, it's just so strange to me. And I do believe Hitler is a monster. And this is one woke right thing that I find somewhat important is this minimization of Hitler. But Stalin, I'm sorry, you cannot minimize Stalin as a monster. And the death count under Stalin and of his own people is significantly higher, even of that of Hitler. So why were we allying with the Soviet Union? It's been a mystery to me. But yeah, but you're making a little bit more sense of it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to have a lot of discussions around this to flesh it out further because there's a lot
Yeah.
to go into, but a lot to
Yeah.
understand. But for those who think that World War II, oh, that's just distant past. We got rid of the fascists. We killed Hitler. We won, right? Yay. And then you have the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? So called. So I think one of the deadliest ideas a person can have is that all of this is just irrelevant in the modern context. But in fact, it is hyper relevant because, as has been pointed out, National Socialism and global communism are actually very well aligned. You know, communism and fascism are two sides of the same coin. You might even say that they're two heads of the same bird. And that's the controlled opposition. It's to lead us to believe that because there's infighting between these factions, that the people are therefore being represented well, that our interests are being preserved and protected, and that our constitutional republic is being upheld. That is the absolute myth. That's the lie of the two-party system today. And so Dinesh D'Souza, with his documentary about the Democrats stealing America, he's part right, partly correct. But in fact, it's the whole two-party system. And if you want some evidences of this, let's look at modern day Russia, right? Let's look who is helping them grow their unjust power and dominion in the world. I'll go ahead and mention this because it has touched a lot of people. The Q PSYOP that was designed to militate against this global pedophile satanic elite that's in control of the world. You know what? Okay, that sounds pretty plausible, to be frank. That yeah, there are a lot of bad things in the world, and who else could be causing them except people who worship the devil, right? But one of the most impactful things I've noticed about this PSYOP is that it actually put people to sleep with respect to the invasion of Ukraine. There were a plan, and that Putin was a good guy. He was cleaning up. He was cleaning the house, right? Maybe I shouldn't go further on that topic right now, but
It's such a other
we
whole
should
can of worms.
understand
And
is what?
it's a whole other can of worms. And I'm just gonna say this,
Yeah,
when people have asked me about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and I don't feel qualified to have a firm opinion on all the aspects of it, except this, that it appears to me that whoever wins that conflict, the people behind the scenes have set it up that they win either way. That's what it looks like to me. Whether Russia goes in and like
yeah,
destroys and demolishes, or we dump all this money into the corrupt Ukrainian system, and the people are the ones suffering, and people of Ukraine. But it seems like the dark forces behind the scenes, the shadowy whatevers, are going to win. They've set it up to win either way, I think. But yeah, it's a whole
yes.
other.
Well, and that's the nature of all wars. All wars are orchestrated and planned by someone who wants to have some advantage. So you look at the Second World War, who stood to benefit from that? Well, the communists, obviously. They're the ones who took all the gains. They're the ones who got all the welfare and the benefits and got consolidation of power in their own countries and so on. And anyway, so they got propped up by the United States. And so uh, looking to the modern situation and knowing that National Socialism and global communism are in fact aligned, even though they appear to fight each other, just that's the Leninist dialectic, this controlled opposition. It's no secret that Donald Trump is a nationalist. And I voted for him in 2016. I didn't vote for him this last election because by around 2020, at least, I had sufficient information that his policies were pretty socialistic. A lot of Americans, conservatives in particular, have been put to sleep on that point. There's a ton of evidence from that, from COVID stimulus checks to the farm subsidies and all that stuff. But you look at their fruits, not just their rhetoric. And something that's unique about Donald Trump, actually, is the fact that he is, well, he's a big tent conservative, right? So he gets a lot of momentum behind him. But he actually fuels this oppression narrative that we are the oppressed, right? And so he's actually the figurehead now for a right-wing movement that actually embodies this disillusionment, this oppression narrative that is inherently a Marxist construct. That means we need to go get revenge on some other class of people. And in this case, that other class of people includes illegal immigrants, right? And I just want to call this out here, looking at the planks of the Communist Manifesto.
So one thing I'll
Point
just
number 4 is confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Say that again. Blank 4 of the Communist Manifesto is what?
I was just going to read this point.
Mm-hmm.
Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. What's happening to the property of these people who are being deported? I don't know if anyone's been asking that question.
Do they have much property? But yeah, that is it.
But he's taking a very hard-nosed, very police state type of an approach to it, right? And maybe it doesn't matter how much it is, but it's about the symbolic victory. It's about getting the people, the animus of the people behind you, right? Anyway, one of the other key points of Perestroika is to promise people everything that they want. How much has Donald Trump been doing that? I know there are going to be people who don't want to hear this. Like, I was asked when I was running for the city council, I had one delegate who came up and said, I have just one question. Are you in favor or not in favor of Donald Trump? And I said, I don't favor his regime at the present because he's got these socialistic policies. And he's like, that's all I need to know. Thanks. Right? It's such a shallow, the partisan system no longer even entertains matters of principle. Yeah. Because it's all about contention. It's all about getting revenge. And that's how you destroy a nation. That's how you destroy the world. I was just going to say, like, that Satan is in fact divided against himself. Right? This is something that we just have a hard time believing because no rational entity would have internal conflicts and fight against itself. But that's what the adversary does. His spirit is the spirit of destruction. And so even the people who are set, even these dictators around the world who are set on global conquest, what they might not realize is that Satan has already planned their destruction as well. Because he's not going to let somebody just rise to the top and like, oh, good, you have all the power now. Now you get to enjoy all the glory. No, they're going to be assassinations, coups, like disasters of all kinds. And so, because this is not a stable system, because it doesn't respect the rights of the people. So, anyways, yeah, absolutely. Look at the Communist Manifesto, and Perestroika is a word everybody needs to know and what it means. Because it really does mean it's the sheep's clothing on the wolf.
We've just barely scratched the surface and opened up all these cans of worms that we're going to have to go into more in the future here. I mean, personally, my opinion on Donald Trump is I have seen him all along as a wrecking ball of some agendas that I am very concerned about. And I don't know that look, I think what your opinion of Trump is completely, like we need to hear that opinion. I would like to think that Trump has good intentions. I have been a supporter of his, not in all counts. The woke right movement that is seeking to radicalize MAGA and is successfully doing that in some cases, getting people really to become everything that Hillary Clinton said, the basket of deplorables, the racists, the whatevers, the white supremacists. there is that element that has grown and been given more voice in recent months. It looks like it's been seeded and been planned for quite some time with top influencers. Now, is Trump going to go full anti-Semite? I don't think so. All I know is this is our salvation as a free people does not lie with our government. Like our federal government is not capable of it is the people at the bottom. It is our grassroots efforts that we are the ones responsible for our liberty, whether or not we have liberty. We cannot outsource that to any president, to any Congress. And if we at the ground will get serious about doing the types of things you're doing with running for city council to try to promote liberty in your own local area, if we don't do those things, we're lost. This cannot be.
Yeah.
Whether to what degree the Trump administration is corrupt, and every administration is corrupt, every president is corrupt. To what degree they're corrupt, it could be worse than I would like to think. That's very possible. But whatever the case may be, we have to be the ones to reclaim our freedoms and to be educated and aware. And so for that, I very much thank you, Seth. I would like to have more of these conversations because you guys have a lot of wisdom to offer, a lot of things that I want to learn about, and I think other people will want to learn about as well. Do you have any last words before we wrap up?
Just that, like, if we, and thank you, this has been a really good conversation. I think we do need to keep learning, because I think we only turn on our political mode like as soon as it's election season, and then the rest of the time our brains are shut off and we're just entertaining ourselves. It's bread and circuses. So we really owe it to ourselves and to our countrymen and our children to invest time on a regular basis to learning the principles of freedom, learning how to install checks and balances, learning that, whoever it's coming from, whichever party, if their narrative is just sit tight, we've got this, we'll go solve this problem for you, we'll go duke it out for you, don't believe them, don't trust them, because we are supposed to have a government by the people and for the people, right? Not just accept blindly whatever someone else tells us is true or tells us that we should believe. And yeah, just remember about control, all about preventing you from exercising your freedoms. And in order to, freedoms really are use it or lose it. So I urge everyone to make use of these resources. Go ahead and get curious, dive into these. I don't know if I can do a little shameless plug here. I guess this is something I've been handing out at the local things here. Is I have a website that I've just created. It's called Cards Against Tyranny. You can see that. There we go. Anyways, cardsagainsttyranny.com. And the idea is just little bite-sized things where you can have these little quiz questions. I hope to turn it into a full, playable game. But yeah, just nourish your mind with the principles taught by the founding fathers. And then, measure the temperature of the water now, right? Because in order to deduce that the frog is in fact boiling, we can't afford to look just 10, 20, 30 years back like modern conservatism does. We need to go all the way back to the founding of our nation. We need to actually have the faith that our founding fathers were inspired, that they set this country in a good way, and that the principles of the Constitution really do apply to everyone, and we're not going to be a free people any sooner than that. So it has everything to do with Jesus, who is the author of freedom, and he taught us even to love our enemies. And just one little breadcrumb that I love here is defendant rights. Those are Amendments 4 through 8. Amendments 4 through 8 in our Bill of Rights. More than half of the text of the Bill of Rights is devoted to protecting people that are suspected, accused, or even convicted of being your enemy. Isn't that interesting? How's that for love your enemy?
You have
And
to
it's
have
not
that.
the pushover.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
You have to have that. There have to be protections for people accused of crimes, or else it's automatically going to turn into a tyranny.
Exactly. Because the bigger criminality is the crime, organized crime that comes from our own government.
Yes.
You know, that is the ultimate thing we need to avoid.
Absolutely.
Because if the head of our government has all power and has no checks on it anymore, and we just blindly trust them, I don't care what that condition is actually described in the literature of the founding fathers as tyranny itself. That's in Federalist number 47. Find the definition of tyranny there.
Mm. Okay, Seth, I'm definitely gonna to be having more conversations with you and Jacob. And it was such a pleasure to meet you. We'll talk more soon. And thank you so much.
Likewise, and thank you so much, Julie. Really appreciate the work you do.
Absolutely.